Can you set a budget for legal fees during a divorce? That is the question of the hour. I'm asked that question in almost every consult. How much is this divorce going to cost and how long is it going to take? Well, the how long it takes has a direct relationship on how much it costs. Obviously, lawyers are billing by the hour. Can you truly budget for a divorce? Probably not. However, what I tell my clients at the onset of a case, once we get a sense of the lay of the land, who the other attorney is, what sort of approach they're taking, is this a scorch the earth divorce and no holds bar, everybody's going in for the jugular? Or is this a case where we're going to start in a more cordial manner and perhaps we're going to sit down and try to mediate the case early on in the process? Those are two very different approaches and they have two very different budgets. Oftentimes we identify an asset at the onset of the case and we say we're going to earmark this asset for future financial expenses that include your lawyer and perhaps some experts that you might need in your case. And we divide that account between the parties if that's appropriate depending on their incomes so that everybody can afford to fund their litigation. There is nothing worse than starting with a lawyer, working with that lawyer for months, and then all of a sudden realizing, oh my gosh, I can't afford my legal team anymore, and now I have to go it alone, or I have to switch to a less expensive lawyer who wasn't the lawyer you first chose. So think wisely when you're looking at your budget and you're assessing which legal team is best to support you. Your credit score and divorce. Is there a correlation? Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if you're the wage earner or you're the dependent spouse financially. I tell all of my clients at the onset of a divorce, grab your credit report, get it, and take a look at it. Sometimes you find accounts that you didn't remember that you even had. Maybe you're secondary on your spouse's credit card. And guess what? As the litigation progresses, suddenly your spouse isn't paying their credit cards, and there goes your credit score. Or suddenly your spouse is racking up tremendous costs. Shopping sprees, vacations, all kinds of things are going on the credit card, and you can barely make the minimum payments, and then you're worried that your credit score is going to tank. I tell all of my clients, take a look what's out there at the onset of the case, and let's monitor it as we go forward. Long-term financial security post-divorce. Isn't that what we all want at the conclusion of the case? No one wants to live with uncertainty in their financial future, not for them and certainly not for their children. So what can you do to plan for this? I encourage my clients while we're still settling the case. Yes, before we ink the deal, I'm saying to my client, let's look ahead. Let's build that hypothetical budget. Where do you plan to live? How do you plan on financing your new home? Are you going to rent? Are you buying a new home? Will you qualify for a mortgage? Let's tap into those resources now. Let's call a mortgage broker. Let's call a financial services provider and start looking at, if my client receives these assets, how will they be able to go off into their future with financial certainty? Now's the time to know whether you qualify for a mortgage, and if so, how much, so that we could build a financial future that brings you certainty, your children certainty, and you can go into the future with hope. Joint accounts and a divorce. Should we close them down and just start over? It really does depend on the family finances. Oftentimes the joint accounts stay open and we're closely monitoring, or we reach an agreement on how we're going to share expenses while the case is pending. Can one spouse just go and suddenly, outside of the norm, spend tens of thousands of dollars in a month from a joint account? No, that wouldn't be permissible, but we need to have clear agreements at the onset of litigation if we're going to continue to operate joint accounts. So how do we reach agreements on how we spend joint funds during the course of the litigation? It depends on the parties' finances. So if I have two working spouses and they basically have been sharing the bills in proportion to their incomes, we use the term maintain the status quo. You'll hear that all the time. We have to maintain the status quo. And if the status quo is our monthly expenses are $30,000 and we each contribute $15,000, that's the status quo. One spouse can't suddenly decide, I'm only putting $5,000 into the joint account. And the other spouse can't decide, all of a sudden our budget's really $40,000 a month and not the 30 that we were accustomed to. So these agreements we reach, sometimes we do interim agreements, consent orders, and small interim fixes so that the parties don't disrupt their family's finances while we proceed through the divorce. Managing the finances during a divorce doesn't need to be a complex process. The concept of maintaining the status quo is well regarded and supported in the court, one, but also having visibility to the family finances, even if you didn't have them before, and monitoring what's the norm for our family, and let's not deviate from that norm. These are all things that you can negotiate at the onset of your case to give you certainty about the family's finances and knowing that the children and you won't be disrupted during the course of the divorce.